the Apothecary Diaries, we step into a world inspired by Imperial China, a society where the fate of a woman is often written before she can even speak, a world that reveres hierarchy, obedience, and beauty, but rarely values intellect, especially when it comes from a woman. Concubines are chosen for their appearance, noble birth, or family ties, offered to the emperor as political gifts. Their influence rests on one thing: favor. And in a world of shifting loyalties and silent wars, that favor can disappear overnight. This is a society where the hierarchy is so deeply normalized that it rarely occurs to anyone to question it. The men take it for granted, and the women have been conditioned to believe it's right. One could argue that, within this system, consent in marriage is a fragile, almost non-existent concept. It's a world where survival often means submission, and questioning the system is dangerous, not just socially, but for one's life. The powerful enforce the rules, the powerless inherit them, and generations are shaped by a cycle of quiet acceptance. In such a place, personal identity blurs beneath the weight of duty and expectation. In a society where women's choices are so deeply restricted, the idea of true consent becomes almost invisible. Most relationships within this world are built on obligation, power, and survival. And while we can't always say for certain what was forced and what was chosen, the environment itself leaves little room for free will. What we can do, however, is examine the headspace of each character at a specific moment in time. By understanding the roles they were forced to play, the fears they carried, and the hopes they clung to, we can begin to trace how each life was shaped within this system. To do that, we'll build a tree, a lineage of people bound by duty, blood, and tragedy, and explore how their origins and circumstances set the stage for this world. We begin with the Empress Regnant, a woman who once held the position of a low-ranking consort to the emperor 2 generations ago. She gave birth to a single son who would later ascend the throne, not through privilege or power, but because a devastating plague claimed the lives of all his half-siblings, leaving him the sole surviving heir. Very little is known about the Empress Regnant's life during her time as a consort, making it difficult to determine the circumstances surrounding the former emperor's conception. However, what is known is the lasting effect she had on her son. Her treatment of him, torment, and emotional control deeply shaped his view of women. As a result, he developed a fear of older women, which manifested in predatory tendencies later in his life. As emperor, he, like his predecessors, was expected to take multiple consorts to secure the production of heirs. However, over time, as his tendencies became known within court circles, powerful clans began sending young girls into the palace, hoping to gain favor and influence within the inner court. It's in moments like these that we see how a society shaped by hierarchy and survival can normalize what should be unthinkable. Practices born from power, fear, and opportunism become accepted, even expected, and few stop to question it. Among these tragedies was Taihou, a consort by the emperor. She later gave birth to a daughter, a girl who would come to be known in history as the Banished Princess. This banished princess would later marry Lishu, and together they had a child named Suirei. In this moment, you can see how this bloodline, so deeply marred by cruelty and violence, should have ended with the former emperor. Yet, it continued. Lishu also took another wife, Xianmei, and with her, he fathered Loulan. For the first time in this twisted lineage, this union was not a crime. And while Lishu having 2 wives still reflects the inequalities and problems of this society, it is, by comparison, a far lesser crime than the horrors committed by the former emperor, who took children as consort. Meanwhile, the former emperor assaulted another young girl, Anshi, who later gave birth to the current emperor. In a grim turn of events, Anshi, once a victim, later sought revenge. What began in victimhood ended in vengeance. As an adult, Anshi assaulted the former emperor, and from that act of revenge, the Imperial brother was born. Now we come to the current emperor, and thankfully, unlike his predecessor, he does not share those pedophilic tendencies. His first child was with Ado, and together they had a son, Jinshi. At the beginning of the series, when the consorts Gyokuyou and Lihua were pregnant, Gyokuyou was 19 years old and Lihua was 23. Then there's Lishu, a 14-year-old consort originally taken by the former emperor. However, she was never touched by the current emperor. In fact, back when he served as prime minister under the former emperor, he and Adu worked together to protect Lishu from the former emperor's advances. Another case is Fuyou, a consort who feigned a mental disability so the current emperor would cast her aside, allowing her to return to her childhood love. She too was never touched by the current emperor. Some even speculate that he knew of her intentions and, whether out of mercy or silent agreement, chose not to punish her. I'll add that the current emperor is no saint. He benefits from the same machinery of power. But his refusal to replicate his father's crimes makes him look like a good person in comparison, while he didn't engage in the despicable acts that his father engaged in. And I'll add that him taking multiple consorts is quite a despicable act in of itself, but at least he didn't do like what his father did. But even so, he is still complicit for upholding a system that enabled what his father was able to do. Now let's talk about the birth origins of Mao Mao. Her conception was a calculated decision made by her mother, Fengxian. At the time, Fengxian was a courtesan living in the red light district. She had fallen in love with a military officer named Lei Khan, but due to his financial status, he couldn't afford to purchase her freedom. In a world where a courtesan's value depended entirely on her reputation and desirability, becoming pregnant was considered reputation ruining. By conceiving a child, Fengxian deliberately lowered her value as a courtesan, and so Mao Mao was born. Finally, I'll end by saying that most of the time humans are controlled by their environment and the system they're living in. You have to ask, can a person truly consent when survival is the only choice? When the banished princess married Lishu, when Fengxian chose pregnancy, were these acts truly of their consent, or the system have forced them to take such measure? While you're here, feel free to check out my other Apothecary Diaries videos. I'll have them linked in the description. Thanks so much for watching.